From the 1830s onward, London was plagued with stories of a demon attack. Attacks so horrible in nature that they would not or could not be reported in the papers. A spectre who could shapeshift from a ghostly figure to a demon, to, yes, even the shape of a bull. With wings, no less. A maniac who could target women on the streets of London or even in their houses and forcibly ravish young ladies,
oh my,
throwing London into a flurry of fear. Aaron, today, our figure is called Spring-Heeled Jack.
Okay, so the clue you gave me at the end of last episode was something about jumping-heeled Jack or something like that. This is not what I was thinking about. This sounds completely off the wall compared to what I was thinking. All I could think about was, you know, those shoes that have the springs in the bottom, and people run along and bounce on them. That's all I've been thinking about all week, and I know it has nothing to do with that. But what an intro! Oh my god, so much to take in.
Well, that's the intro before the intro.
Oh,
hello, and welcome to His and Hers History.
Nicely done. I like that.
I am your host, Steph, and we have our co-host, Aaron, here.
That's me.
Each week, one of us brings a historical topic to the podcast, and only I, the host this week, know what this historical topic is. Aaron, have you safely not heard of Spring-Heeled Jack?
I can safely say I've never heard of this, yeah.
Fantastic. And we are looking at this historical topic with a light-hearted view. So we are here to have a bit of
fun, yeah. It's not too serious. You'll soon find out that we kind of take the mickey out of most things. So.
All right. So Spring-Heeled Jack is described as a tall and thin gentleman. He is said to have a terrifying and frightful appearance with a diabolical face that included clawed hands and eyes that resembled red balls of fire.
Oh my goodness.
Is this what you were expecting?
No, not at all. This is way, way far left of what I was expecting.
He often wore a black coat and a helmet and a tight-fitting white garment.
He sounds like he has no idea who he is or what fashion he's into. He's a bit all over the place.
Perhaps the most spectacular thing about Spring-Heeled Jack is his ability to make giant leaps over the top of buildings, over ledges, and even just to skip away joyfully from his victims.
I knew it. He's got those spring shoes. He was way ahead of his time. He's a trendsetter in fashion and with his shoes.
So today, please join us as we explore the history and the horror that is Spring-Heeled Jack. That's
quite the intro.
I feel like we need some music there.
We might need some music. It might be very dramatic, but that intro is... I don't know what to expect. That's the other episodes we've done have been pretty straightforward, I guess. But this one is way out there. I'm looking forward to it.
Let me help you get into the mind frame, Aaron.
Yep, I've got my coffee ready. You've got your chai tea ready. I'm ready.
So imagine, if you will, you are a gentleman in the year of 1837.
Done.
Of course, as a respectable man, you live nowhere but the city of London.
Of course, obviously.
Queen Victoria is but an 18-year-old girl and has only recently taken over the monarchy.
Nice.
So, you as a man are nervous at the thought of a female leader. Remember, this is still a time when monarchs had political power. And, as a man, you believe that the country needs a strong leadership skills. And that's a skill that women simply don't have in your mind.
Hang on, let me get into character. It should be a king. I don't want a queen. Men are better rulers. There you go. I spared you the accent this time.
Thank you. It has been a cold winter. In fact, so cold that the River Thames has frozen over twice this season.
Sounds like London. I haven't been there. You've been there, but it's cold.
Please remember that ship importing and exporting have been icebound.
So they couldn't get ships into port.
Yeah. But this hasn't stopped the city from burning. The cold temperatures had made citizens desperate for warmth, and the Royal Exchange, the centre of trade, will soon be burnt to ash in this year.
Wow.
So it's a tumultuous time.
There's a bit going on.
So imagine you a gentleman now sitting down to your morning paper on the 28th of December.
Yep, I've got my pipe in hand. I've got my coffee.
You expect to see more of the same accounts of pranks that had been happening in the suburb of Greenwich. Silly young boys destroying a statue of a local painter, lighting firecrackers and placing them at people's doors, and even stealing a sign from the local pub. You get the gist.
Sounds like a Harry Potter book to me.
These young men were labelled the effects of Aristocratic example, So at this time, these privileged young men were allowed to run riot as a result of privilege and money, of course. As you read on, you read a curious bit of information, and I quote this from an article from the Morning Chronicle. It is likewise currently reported that some scoundrel disguised in a bearskin and wearing spring shoes has been seen jumping to and fro before foot passengers in the neighbourhood of Lewisham, and has one or two instances greatly alarmed females. This feat, it is said, is to decide a wager, he having undertaken to play off these freaks for a number of nights in 9 different parishes without being apprehended. He has been named Steel Jack by the inhabitants of Lewisham, many of whom are afraid to leave their houses after dark.
So this guy is running around in a weird costume with spring shoes on. He's like just jumping around the place, and everyone's like, "What the hell's going on?"
Have I got the gist of it? Account.
But have I got the gist of it right? They're just worried about this guy because he's weird, basically. Because he hasn't done, at this stage, he hasn't done anything wrong.
He has greatly alarmed females.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's probably a big crime back then. But technically, he hasn't done anything wrong.
But what does greatly alarmed females mean? Remember, this is Victorian times.
Yeah, true.
Proper
Maybe he
times.
startled them. I don't know. But it sounds like he's just a weirdo at this stage.
Well, so the reason I sort of started with that, to get you an idea of sort of what early Victorian era was like. It's a very worrying time for people that were used to the time before.
Yeah, I suppose that anything out of the ordinary would have, been strange, I suppose. Yeah.
So at this time, there was a lot of distrust of the rich and the poor.
Yeah, sort of
very segregated.
What's it called? Segregated, like the rich and the poor.
So this is our first mention of what we now have come to know as Spring-Heeled Jack. His first appearance is said to have been as early as November of the same year, when a young servant girl named Mary Stevens was walking home during the late evening through a light drizzle. She was walking near Lavender Hill, which in itself is not far from the Thames as well. As she reached the top of the hill, Mary was greeted with what she called an unspeakable horror. A tall figure came out of the shadows and filled in the space between them in mere seconds.
So he's just sprung over towards her, pretty much.
Sprung.
Yeah.
He grabbed Mary and held her against her will.
Oh, I thought it was going to be a loving hug. I'm so sorry.
And with that, he planted a big sloppy kiss on her face.
Oh, that's nice.
It's not nice.
Well, it was against her will, but
was very
how lovely,
against
a
her.
big hug and a kiss.
After that, he disappeared into the night as quickly and as mysteriously as he arrived.
What a charmer. What an absolute charmer.
She reported that he left with a malicious laugh and perhaps the weirdest addition, leaping supernaturally high as he left.
I suppose I was just thinking about it then. Even back then, if you saw something like that, like today, you would be like really taken aback. It's quite bizarre, but there'd be sort of an explanation for it. But even back then, there was still a bit of mystery around. So you'd be like, what is this creature? That's crazy. But he can kiss, so it's nice.
It's not nice.
Okay, maybe.
I think you need a lesson on consent.
Yeah, there's definitely no consent there, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it made her heart flutter a bit. She wanted to report it and see if she could draw him out.
She called him a tall figure of unspeakable horror.
So you say that, but I hear tall, dark and handsome. I'm sorry, continue.
The next attack happened in December 1837. The paper, the Northampton Mercury, loved the newspaper names in this time.
Yeah, they're cool.
Reported that a figure with spring heels had been spotted in a village not far from London. It was reported that the figure was draped in steel armour. He made his escape by leaping over hedges and running along country lanes.
So now we know he's tall, dark and handsome, and he wears a knight's armour. He's a knight in shining armour.
You're not getting the point.
He's like a ladies' man. No, he's definitely a creep.
At this time, reporters were coining this menace as Steel Jack.
Just Steel Jack? So they hadn't caught onto the boots yet?
Not yet.
Oh, he was like really angry at home. He's like, what about my boots? I haven't noticed my boots yet.
In the reports, this prankster was noted to be dressed as a fool and scaring old ladies. A few weeks later, the stories of this menace were still coming in, and the perpetrator was coined Spring Jack.
Okay, so he finally gets his credit. But they say he's dressed like a fool. I suppose they say that about every person who, branches out in fashion, they start a new trend, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're a fool."
I wonder.
Maybe he was just trying to start a trend. Definitely not.
Well, you'll see he gets a bit experimental.
Oh, so he changes his look up.
We'll see. So one of the accounts went like this. At one house, he rung the bell, and on the servants coming up to open the door, the brute stood in no less dreadful figure than a spectre clad most perfectly. What do you think that interprets
It
to?
sounds like he's opened the door and there's someone who's rather tall with like an overcoat on and looks quite menacing standing above them. I would imagine that's what it's saying.
Spectre.
A spectre, yeah. Evil, by the way. Again, he hasn't done anything wrong yet.
Aaron.
Apart from being weird. Oh, sorry, the kissing. The forceful kissing, yeah.
You'll see.
I forgot about that.
The consequence was that the poor girl immediately swooned. So, swooned as in fainted.
That's old-timey fainting. So she was shocked and went, oh my God. And fell over.
I just wonder why that happened so often in history.
What do you mean swooning?
Aaron.
What do you mean swooning? Like,
The fainting.
yeah, wasn't it seen as like women did that as like I'm going to try and get this guy's attention. Oh, and
I
they'd
doubt
swoon
that's
and
what's
fall over.
happening in this
Yeah,
situation.
obviously not in this situation, but yeah.
And then what happened was she came to and started screaming out most violently, take him away.
Oh, wow. So like she swooned, fainted.
She did not want him, Aaron.
No, but she fell down and then instantly awoke and was like, take him away from me.
I guess so.
And it was probably like, I'm just saying hi.
No, Aaron.
No, okay, I'm going to stop with this angle.
In these articles, the reporters state that several women had been so scared that they were likely to become, and I quote, burdens on their families.
Oh, what a
harsh.
horrible way to look at. I'm just getting an image of like the man just slapping their wife back and forth. Get a hold of yourself. You can't be emotional like this. What a horrible thing to do. You're a burden on this family. Please stop being so emotional.
The stories were so widespread that the Lord Mayor of London, John Cohen, admitted in the January of 1838 that he had received many, many accounts of sightings of Spring-Heeled Jack. So the Lord Mayor would have acted as a member of government, basically. Yeah. So people were appealing to him.
So once he starts talking about it, it's big news.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The reports were full of stories of a figure, often wearing an outlandish costume, sometimes taking the form of a bear, ghost, or devil.
Fashionista, I like to call it.
Complete with the horns and claws. The stories would often go that Spring-Heeled Jack would call into a house or stalk a lonely traveller of London roads and strip women of their clothes or frighten the men with his ghoulish appearance.
Wow, it sounds scary.
Are you finding a problem now with what
Yeah,
you did?
it's sounding like, you sort of sound like you were talking about at the start, a bit of a prankster and that, but it's sort of turning out into something a bit darker maybe.
Sexual deviance.
And so, yeah, potentially. But I keep thinking of that, famous Australian clip. It was like a meme for a while where he says, and they came bounding over. That's all I can think of is like when they look up and they see him, and he came bounding over.
I haven't seen that for so
Haven't
long.
you?
It's a great one.
Yeah, look it up on YouTube. Australian man, he came bounding over. It's amazing.
I wonder if that happened in Australia. If
What do you
that
mean?
would have been the reports.
Yeah. Local man sees Spring-Heeled Jack, and he came bounding over with a thick Australian accent.
After this release of information from the Lord Mayor, a committee was formed in London by the commissioners of the Metropolitan Police. Their job was to investigate, quote, whether any persons has been injured or frightened in any manner by the figure which is said to be going about the outskirts of town, resembling a ghost, bear, devil, for the purpose of alarming the inhabitants.
So they've amassed a force. They're trying to hunt him down now. And basically his crimes at this stage are sexual assault, basically, and is making someone swoon a crime?
Quite possibly.
Maybe. Door knocking, I guess.
Well, basically what they were saying with that statement is they wanted to find proof that it was happening. They still didn't really believe it.
So it's all hearsay at this point.
But they were also a special task force to catch a ghost, basically.
So hearsay. So my theory of him being a dapper gentleman could still be true.
Maybe.
I'm sorry, maybe not.
On a dark evening on the 21st of February, 1838, the traditional ringing of the doorbell began at a property called Bearblind Cottage in the East End of London. So that area would soon become an impoverished area of London, but this time you can almost imagine it as a little town.
Oh, because London wasn't fully formed.
Yeah.
And things. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it was still, you were close enough to people to know them, but far enough to have your own sort of house.
Not
and
rural,
country.
but
Not rural.
But small town vibes.
In the middle, yeah. So a young 18-year-old woman named Jane Alsop came to the call. Of course, you must be thinking that this is, of course, another spring-heeled Jack attack.
It sounds like it, yes. Another swooning incident.
This new guest announced himself as the police, and from the dark had stated that he had captured spring-heeled Jack. And after a whole month of torture for the people of London, this pest was finally caught.
Really? So his reign of terror was 4 months or so?
The policeman shouted out for a light, shouting, "Bring me a light, for we have caught spring-heeled Jack in the lane." Jane, of course, wanting to help, came to his call.
Oh, God. What's happening here?
And as requested, handed him a candle. As she got closer, the light shone upon the policeman. But instead of a policeman, he revealed under his cloak. Lo and behold, this was another deception. And as the cloak lifted, Jane saw a pale, oil-like white as milk skin and eyes that resembled balls of fire.
He's like a ghoul.
Is another... that's what I mean. Is it man? Is it ghost?
Maybe
it's
just
devil?
like a really sickly man.
Maybe
Well played,
that's why he went last.
Well played, Spring-Heel Jack.
The last reports from Jane were that this figure vomited forth a quantity of... I want you to have a prediction. What
Vomited
do you
for...
think?
I'm going to say like rum or something and... Custard? I don't know. What's British like?
Would you believe me if I said it was blue and white flames from his mouth?
Oh, what? Oh, so he's got like an old-timey powder thing and he's like...
No.
So this bloke... Okay, I'm starting to form what's it called? Like a profile on this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So he's obviously a master of disguise and he can produce flames. So he's maybe a man of science, perhaps.
Maybe.
So maybe he's just like... a really twisted scientist type guy who's into scaring women.
And assaulting women.
And well, he's only assaulted one. Maybe it was like...
He's assaulted many.
Oh, well,
that's what the Lord Mayor
true.
has received.
It sounds like I'm on his side here. I'm not. But I'm starting to get a profile of this guy because he's not actually out to hurt anyone, although sexual assault is horrible and he shouldn't do that.
That is hurting someone.
Okay, maybe I should hold back on my assumptions until I get the full idea of what this man's about.
Okay.
Assuming it's a man.
Obviously, Jane, receiving such a shock, screamed, alerting her younger sister Mary to the scene. Mary rushed to the front door and saw her sister in the claws, literal claws, of spring-heeled Jack. He was tearing her clothes off with her claws, made of something metal according to accounts. The sisters fought to keep Jane inside, and at the first chance they got, closed the door on the attacker.
I take back everything I said.
Mm-hmm.
He's clearly horrible. I mean, one incident should have been enough to tell me that this guy is not right.
You needed the
but
claws.
two, I'm so sorry. Like the assumptions I made.
However, the close of the door did not stop him.
Oh my!
As
He's getting very daring.
He continued to roam around the property, taunting the girls. It was only when the women called for the police from upstairs window that the attacker finally slunk away.
I bet you like ran his claws along like the walls and stuff like that.
I
That
think
sounds
you're
like
right.
something he would do. Yeah. Shh. Yeah, like shh.
This was the turning point in the case. As in previous accounts, the targets had mostly been the poorer class. However, in the case of Jane, her family was well-to-do, and the commission started to take spring-heeled Jack seriously.
Oh, so all the poor peasants, they're just like, you're just making it up. But as soon as someone with a little bit of money, oh no, the spring-heeled Jack, they're like, yep, we'll sort it out.
I told you.
Well, I suppose they
there
sort of
was
were
classes.
sorting it out, but yeah.
Fear was only intensified when only a few weeks later, another young woman was victimised by spring-heeled Jack, which was now being referred to as a gang of young aristocrats.
Oh, so they
it
think
was
it's
sort
multiple
of
people.
They believe so. They believe so at that time. They thought it was sort of the poor against the rich, because there was so much hate for the richer.
So they think it's a bunch of rich kids.
Pretty much.
Well-to-do
Just
kids. Well,
terrorising
it makes
people.
sense because they could get multiple... They'd have access to multiple disguises and things they could buy, and they'd have access to stuff that you could make flames out of, I suppose,
I don't
like
know about the
gunpowder.
flames. I wonder how
Maybe
that
still a
would
mad
have been
scientist.
done.
Mad scientist.
So our next victim's name was Lucy Scales, and she was 18 years old as well. She was returning.
He likes him young. I'm sorry.
Oh my goodness. She was returning from a visit to her brothers and was accompanied by her sister. Again, seems to be a pattern. She was walking down a street named Narrow Street when she happened upon...
Was it really small? I'm sorry.
I
Continue.
wonder. We need to look this up now. When she happened upon a shadowy figure. She continued walking with the intent to walk past the figure, as she had originally thought that the shadowy shape was a woman due to the billowy structure at the bottom of their outfit.
Like, she had a big caboose, is that what she thought?
Basically.
Junk in the trunk.
She thought it was a bit odd, but she's like, maybe this is just the next trend.
Maybe.
Lucy had thought the figure looked strange. However, who knows, maybe the residents of Narrow Street were taking some risk-taking fashion advice.
Yeah, maybe they were like our Spring Heel Jack, they were branching out with their fashion.
Yep. As she drew closer to the figure, she noticed it pull back its unusually shaped cloak to reveal a lantern and the now customary blue flame which blew into her face.
Boring, old news. Come up with like a different flame, like an orange one or something, purple one.
Orange flame.
I don't think is that possible? Probably. There's probably some metal that you can... Oh, there's an orange flame right in front of us. Oh, I realise what I've done just now. A regular flame is orange. I am colourblind.
You are.
That's a little fact about me, so that was embarrassing.
Now, unfortunately, to Victorian beliefs, the poorer of the London residents may have believed in a demonic figure. However, when it came to the more wealthy residents, their top suspect was in fact suspects. The opinion of the senior police officials was that Spring-Heeled Jack was actually a gang of wealthy aristocrats, like I'd already said. Initially, the police had been hesitant to accredit the first attack on Jane as Spring-Heeled Jack, and of course attributed her visions to that of mistaken appearance, and that the attack was a drunken frolic, which makes it better?
It's still sexual assault, isn't it? They were just like, she's an emotional woman. Slap her. You're being a burden on us.
However, after the Lucy Scales attack, the police had to give a little more credit to Jane's story.
They're like, oh, God, she's rich. We're going to have to follow this up. Oh, my God.
I bet that is a conversation.
That's probably how they probably like, oh, my God, we're going to have to follow this up.
Soon after this attack, Milbank and Payne, two men that were around Jane's property at the time of the events, were brought up. They had been seen wearing white shooting jackets close to the property and had been close enough to the property to assist when the women's shouting began. However, all that was discredited by the landlord of a local tavern, who of course had their alibi well in hand as they were drinking heavily and, in his words, was so drunk that they had not the least idea of anything that had happened.
They were just getting on the beers, so having a good time. Yep, nothing wrong with that.
Although the men were absolved, it still tarnished their reputations, and widespread reporting of Spring-Heeled Jack was likely prompted copycats. So the reporting of their sort of involvement...
Not even involvement, just being near the scene. Yeah. Sort of
made the case a bit bigger, and so copycats started.
Gave it a bit more clout, so people started chasing, the credit.
Some notable examples took place in March and April of 1838. In March, a police constable named P.C. Markham, excellent name by the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Love it.
Was patrolling Kentish Town.
Kentish Town, awesome. Keep going, sorry.
Imagine his surprise when suddenly a flurry of women and children ran past him screaming in horror, "Here's Spring-Heeled Jack!" How did you assume? Now,
did he slap all of them on the way through? He's like, you're being a burden. He just slapped them repeatedly as they ran past him.
The brave constable, as he was called in the paper, drew his baton and set to confront the demon.
I thought you were going to say he was going to confront the women, like I was saying about, and batter them.
The PC went up to him and grabbed him by the collar. Alas, it turned out that this demon was nothing but a man called Daniel Granville, a local man that was described as a simple man. Yeah. When the constable brought him by the scuff into the butcher shop, he saw that the boy was wearing a mask that was embellished with blue glazed paper. So he was
just a fella just out and about in the world.
Luckily, they did have some sense in Victorian times. He got let off.
Oh, thank God.
Just a warning.
I thought they were just like, we have to beat you anyway because no reason.
Although I hope he didn't intend on doing the same things that Spring-Heeled Jack did.
Oh, so like he was one of the copycats.
He was one of the copycats, but he said he was just doing it for fun, so hopefully that's correct.
Well, I still probably I wouldn't let him go straight away. Like, mate, don't do that.
Yeah.
You might get like shot or bashed or whatever.
Similarly, in April in Kilburn, a very similar thing happened. However, in the constable's stead, we have Mrs. Charlotte Haggerstone. Mrs. Haggerstone's friend was grabbed by a figure habited in a white sheet and a hideous mask. Unfortunately, for the wannabe Spring-Heeled Jack, Charlotte immediately recognised his answer, instead knowing that it was James Painter, a young man in service of Charlotte's friend. Haggerstone told the men matter-of-factly that they were not scared of him, and he took flight over the garden wall with his spring heels.
Where are these people getting these spring heels from? They wouldn't have been in high demands. Is everyone like a shoemaker or something?
I don't think they actually have spring heels. I
Oh,
think
that
it
makes
means
me
that he
sad.
jumped really
See,
high.
I've still got
I've
the image in my head. They came bounding over.
Now, it comes as no surprise that as soon as Painter was gone, he was just as quickly apprehended and charged £4 for his conduct.
£4? I suppose that's
Probably
probably a lot
lot.
of money back then for a young boy.
After this, many more attacks followed suit, and the fear of Spring-Heeled Jack grew and grew and became the phantom that London would later fear. The identity or identities of Spring-Heeled Jack remains a mystery. Perhaps it was, in fact, a ghoul of the night, a group of rich young men with an agenda against women, or even just a random group of men who had nothing better to do.
So they never found out who it was?
No. However, the real fear of London should have been that of human nature. These times were a tumultuous time for London, and they were in the midst of a deep freeze and great political change. There was a great divide between poor and rich, and a general feeling of distrust. Although the Spring-Heeled Jack has become more of a myth than an actual fear in the last century, the sentiment of his attack still remain. Spring-Heeled Jack was the embodiment of fears of the city at the beginning of Queen Victoria's reign and remains a symbol of predatory attacks.
So it's still late enough where it could have been considered like a mysterious beast or something, but probably bordering on like being a human being sort of thing, yeah.
So we might finish off with a couple of little interesting tidbits that I found along the way. So one suspect of who Spring-Heeled Jack might have been was an eccentric young Marquis of Waterford, and he was considered wild by Victorian society and been branded as Mad Marquis.
So he was a weirdo.
Oh, I think he was just a bit of a creep.
Oh, sad.
A well-known creep.
Yeah.
In 1870, the army set traps to catch Spring-Heeled Jack after scared sentries reported being terrified by a man who sprang onto the roof of their sentry box.
1870, so that's like 40 years after. So was he like disappeared for 40 years, or were there sightings in between that? Or you're not sure?
There were a couple of sightings in between that, but they did slow down. I don't believe that Spring-Heeled Jack was a person.
So it was, yeah, by the sounds of it, it was a group of people. Yeah, that makes
And
more
then
sense.
maybe just a myth.
Yeah, maybe.
Also in 1870, angry townsfolk of Lincoln are reported to have shot him in the streets, but he just laughed and bounded away, leaping over fences and even small buildings.
No, I'm going, yeah, he's a beast of some kind. He's a ghoul.
Spring-Heeled Jack was also last spotted in 1904.
Oh, wow. That's
In
pretty
Liverpool.
recent, isn't it?
Bounding up and down streets, leaping
be so
from
old by now.
cobbles to
Sorry, go on.
rooftops and back.
So he's leaping on the rooftops. He'd be old as. But I suppose if you've got spring boots, doesn't matter how old you are. It's just going to give you that athleticism you need to spring and surprise young women. Apparently.
I still don't think that you have grasped that he's
Oh, no,
not a
it's
good
obviously,
guy.
it's horrible, but
I see that smile on your face.
I'm sorry.
We don't need
It's-
an Australian Spring-Heeled Jack.
Definitely not.
I hope you enjoyed that episode, Aaron.
I did. It went way off course to what I thought it was going to. Here I am sitting, it's going to have... Well, it's sort of had the thing I was thinking about, like shoes with springs in them, but some guy or many men or women dressed up in multiple disguises running around kissing women on the lips and then laughing and running away.
Using
So-
their claw hands
Yeah,
to...
rip their clothes off.
Ugh.
It started off sort of sounding a bit harmless, and then I do apologise. These this person and or people were clearly deviants, predators that, scared a lot of women who were being burdens on the rest of their families and need to be slapped.
Is that the takeaway?
Well, I got the takeaway is that there was creeps around, and also that if women had any logical complaint about anything, they were seen as being a burden on their families, which is so sad. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. That was good.
You still found that fun. If you would like to listen to more episodes, you can find us at our website, hisandhershistory.podbean.com. We are also available on the Podbean app, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Do you have a clue for next week, Aaron?
I do, Steph. Are you a fan of being mooned? Are you a fan of someone bearing their ass in your face?
Is anyone?
I mean, it's pretty funny. A lot of the time, the times that I've seen it with my friends.
The answer's no.
No, the answer's no. Well, it depends on the circumstances, I guess. I did just say it in this episode that it was sort of okay for that guy to go up and kiss that woman,
no.
Which it isn't at all, by the way. But yes, I'm looking at the history of mooning. So I'll be looking at the origins, where it was first used, all the way up until today. So it should be a bit of fun.
High school, schoolyard.
Yeah, schoolyard humour. Everyone loves a good mooning.
Sounds good. Feel free to like, comment, and follow our podcast on whatever platform suits you.
Give us a follow, whatever you like. We'd love it.
Time to go, I think.
I think it's time to go. Prepare to get mooned next week.
Oh my. Bye.
Catch ya.